amazing that when I left ITV, the staff said that they had learned a lot too, as few of the staff had any direct experience of meeting someone with a learning disability, let alone working alongside them. One of my highlights was being able to co-present the episode of the political programme Sharp End during Learning Disability Week back in June this year. I was able to film a package to examine the progress made since the introduction of the All-Wales strategy in 1983, the year I was born. This involved interviewing a number of people, including Welsh Government Minister Julie Morgan, MS. On the programme, I then interviewed 3 Senedd members about their reaction to my film. So, bit of a plug, just Google Sharp End and select June the 19th, and you too can then view the programme. I also contributed to a discussion on the BBC Politics Wales programme a few weeks ago about the potential benefits of job sharing, the role of members of the Senedd in the future, which might then encourage more people with disabilities to put themselves forward for election. As well as these wonderful opportunities, I have been lucky enough to travel widely as part of my work, visiting South Africa, Lesotho and Botswana as a volunteer on 3 occasions, and during my 5-year term as the council member for Europe for an organisation called Inclusion International, I was able to speak at events in the USA, Kenya, and many European countries. These visits enabled me to learn a lot about the way in which different cultures support those with disabilities. Together with being an Olympic torchbearer for the London Olympics back in 2012, and speaking at the United Nations headquarters in New York. All these things have been wonderful experiences, and I'm so privileged that I've taken part in them. Whoops. As one of the very few people in Wales with a learning disability who serves as a counsellor, I am often asked how I became involved in politics. It came about as my first role when I joined Mae'r Cymru was as the project officer for a new exciting project called Partners in Politics. This involved visiting schools and colleges across Wales to speak to young people about the importance of voting and having a voice to bring about change for those young people who have a disability. We would then invite elected members of the Senedd to face the young people and answer their questions. Several of my colleagues questioned why, if I thought politics was so important, why I did not stand for election myself. So I decided I would practice what I was preaching, and so I stood as an independent candidate for my local community council in Pentilch near Cardiff. I first found myself elected and then have retained my seat for the past 13 years. Okay. I feel really passionate about supporting young people, and especially those with disabilities who live in my local community. I enjoy ensuring that the Council is always taking on board the needs of those with any type of disability. Initially, I found the amount of paperwork and some of the language used a challenge, but after a while, I got to grips with the processes involved. Nowadays, all the documents come to me electronically, which enables me to organise them more easily on my tablet, so that I can then follow the discussions in our meetings and contribute a lot easier. I especially enjoyed being a member of our climate change and well-being subgroup, as well as a new working group which is looking at creating a youth council so many young people in our community can then have their voices heard. I really think it's important that more people who have a disability are involved in politics at all levels if we are to bring about the changes that are needed to ensure that everyone has equal opportunities in life. I think it's really significant that since 2022, Wales has led the way in this country in offering financial assistance to candidates with a disability, standing at the grassroots level of local democracy. I really hope that this will assist more people with disabilities to receive the support that they rightly deserve in communities. Thank you once again for this opportunity and to be part of today's very special event. And I look forward to networking and meeting lots of you during the course of today. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Well, if that doesn't inspire you all, nothing will. So I move swiftly on and have to say, unfortunately, that Savannah Taj is unable to join us today. So Catherine Fuchs, who very kindly stepped in quickly, who was the previous director of WEN, Women's Equality Network Wales, so does know her way around this subject somewhat, is now going to speak to us.
Joyce, and diolch yn fawr everyone for being here. And especially very big thank you to WEN Wales for inviting me back to be here today. I must admit, when I walked in the door of the Senedd this morning, I felt absolutely overwhelmed. And the atmosphere was electric. And I just thought, wow, look at all these incredible women who've come here to take their rightful place here in the Senedd, in the seat of power in Wales, ready to take part in our democracy. And I was so excited and very emotional because I left WEN 1 month ago to pursue my career in politics. And so coming back and just seeing this incredible number of women and this day actually happening was just wonderful. So yes, thank you for believing in this idea to the Llywodraeth, Ellen Jones, and not thinking it was completely crazy and that we could do this. So I wanted to share a little bit with you about why I became involved in politics and involved in the Women's Equality Network Wales as director. And really it comes down to one important thing, which was my mum was a single parent, and that taught me a really valuable lesson early on in life. So my mum was forced to leave school by her parents at 16. She wasn't allowed to stay on and do A-levels, even though she could have done. She wasn't given the opportunity to go to university like her brother did. It was just like, leave school, get a job, get married. And so that's what she did. But 14 years later, when her marriage to my dad broke down, She had no hope, no qualifications, no money, and she had 4 children under the age of 10. And so she had to bring us up. But she did what every woman probably in this chamber has ever done. She just stepped up to it. She got on with it. She got 3 jobs, worked night and day to bring us up. So she went on with the caring, unpaid, and she went on with her 3 jobs, underpaid. And so many of us have done that, but that lesson in my childhood taught me that girls don't have the same opportunities as boys. They didn't then, 50 years ago, and they don't now. And women didn't even have the right to have a mortgage or a bank account in their own name the day when I was born, which I find absolutely astonishing. And women certainly didn't have equal power and equal voice. So that lesson really about gender inequality early on in life made me a lifelong feminist, and it made me want to campaign for equal rights and to tackle unfairness generally. And that's why I applied for the fantastic job of director at Wales 6 years ago, and was, of course, surprised to get it because I am a woman, and I, of course, had imposter syndrome and thought, I can't possibly get that job. But I did. And probably the reason I applied, actually, was because I did a mentoring programme similar to Equal Power, Equal Voice. And that mentoring programme gave me the confidence to believe in myself. It gave me the network to help me get there. And it just changed my life, basically. And it was just by luck. I saw an article in The Observer about this Fabian Women's Network mentoring programme. And I thought, oh, I'll give it a go, I'll apply, because I've always been interested in politics, but I have absolutely no idea how to get involved. So I went on the programme. It had a 3-pronged approach. You were given a mentor. Mine was Madeleine Moon, MP. You had lots of training sessions on things like how to speak to the media, how to do public speaking. And the third aspect of it was this incredible network, a peer-to-peer network of other women who've been on the scheme who would help you and be your champion, basically. And so I found it incredibly beneficial. We'd all share job opportunities, boost each other's confidence, pick each other's up when we felt down, and encouraged each other in the sphere of politics that we wanted to do. So that then led on when I started at Wales, and one of the objectives of Wales at that time was to have a mentoring programme. So it was perfect. So we set up a mentoring programme at Wales, and that was really part of a 2-pronged attack, because Women's Equality Network Wales has, as one of our key objectives, to get diverse and equal representation in leadership across Wales. So in the Senedd, in our council chambers, in our boards, in our business, and so on. So the way we felt we could do that was, 1, by having a mentoring programme, and 2, by working at changing the laws to ensure that more women could stand and that we would have gender quotas in the Senedd. So we're delighted that Welsh Government is going ahead with that, and it should ensure that we have that 50-50 representation in the Senedd. So I just want to give a shout out actually to the EPE programme. Our partners, Stonewall Cymru, Disability Wales and East are the partners with Wales that deliver that programme, and it's just been fantastic. And we're also extremely grateful to our funders, the Lottery and Welsh Government, for that programme. So I can safely say I would not have stood if it wasn't for the mentoring programme, but I wanted to tell you a bit about my journey into becoming a councillor, which I am now. I stood several times before becoming elected, and I would say don't ever give up. And I stood once, first of all in 2016 in the Senedd elections, then in 2017 as a county councillor when I lost by 24 votes. How depressing is that? And I thought I might never do it again, because I thought, I worked so hard and just so close. But anyway, I was really disappointed. But then a friend before May 2022 elections, in the council elections, said, how about it, Kath, come on, why don't you stand? And I thought, okay, I'll do it. And I decided to stand, and I won my election that time, and I'm now really proud to be a county councillor in Monmouthshire. Thank you. And like Councillor Sarah Pickard, I thought, I should practice what I preach. Here I am at Wen saying more women need to stand. So I'll give it a go again, and I did. I'm learning every day. I'm serving my community every day, and I really love it. It's such a rewarding thing. It can be frustrating, but it's also extremely rewarding. And I also decided to go one step further and stand for selection as an MP. So I'm also a candidate in the next general election. So a new chapter begins, which is exciting. But my advice to you all would be, if you are even vaguely thinking you're interested in politics, and you may stand one day, just start right now. You've already made one massive step. You've registered for today, you've come along here, and here you are. So that's one step. But don't look upon it as a massive thing. I'm going to stand, therefore I suddenly need to do everything I'm going to do to stand. Set yourself a small target, one thing each week. So, for example, you may leave here and think, right, I'll join, I think I know more about which political party I want to join. I'll join a party. Or you may apply for the next mentoring programme, for example. Or you may go and talk to a woman you admire who's already in politics and find out from them all the advice they can give you. You may go out door knocking, but just don't make it into this massive, huge thing. Am I going to stand or am I not going to stand? Dip your toe in the water and make small steps, and then you will find out gradually if you want to do it or not. And it's not like some huge, awful decision. Second piece of advice, I've already said it really, don't be put off if you don't succeed the first time. So many government ministers of all political parties have stood more than once. Third piece of advice, continue your journey that you've started today. We've got pledge cards in our bag. I'm sure people will be referring to them later. You've got pledge cards in your bag, so write down the one or two things you're going to do as a result of today, because we need all of you in power. We need all of us. And really my message today is, let no political party ever say again, where are the women? Let no political party ever say again, but women don't want to take part. Or the worst one, where are those hard-to-reach women? They cannot say that anymore, because here we are in this Senedd, where we belong. We belong here. Thank you.
That's great. We've heard from the keynote speakers, and a lot of it resonated with me coming into power. I've always been like I am, because I reflect my childhood, and I was always outspoken. I'm one of 8, so another 7 like me, and we were 4 boys and 4 girls. And my father was probably a feminist without knowing it, because he taught us all the things he taught the boys. His words, not mine. In case your husband's useless, you might need to know how to do these things. You might need to know how to do some DIY, some gardening, how to look under the bonnet of the car, know where the oil and the water go, and all of those things. So that was interesting when I heard other people's stories about how they were treated differently in the same setting. And like you, Catherine, my mother worked her socks off with the skills that she had acquired through life, cooking, cleaning, and became a caretaker of a school in the end, and only because she hadn't had the opportunity for the education that she would have achieved. And I'm the only person out of 8 who went to university in my family. So it gives an idea, you know, when you're bringing up 8 children, you haven't got a lot of money to go around. I remember my first interview when I was elected as a councillor and was told to put my mouth into better use than lobbying on the side. I had a young interview, and she wanted to know where I bought my clothes and things. And I said to her, look, you know, when I was young, all my clothes were modelled, all of them, before I had them. And she found it really interesting, and she said, really? And I said, yeah, at least 1 year, 2, maybe 3, because I'm the youngest of 4 girls. And I had a lot of good positive feedback from that, because it empowered people to say, which you couldn't say then, back in mid-90s, that, you know, wearing used clothes, second-hand clothes, hand-me-downs, whatever they were called, the label of the day, was okay. And it's those things that we can bring to a room. But I've always been a feminist, and I tried several times. Not for the first time I stood to get elected, I was determined I was going to get elected. And I became more determined when I met my male counterparts, who were really surprised that a woman had actually put a name forward and dared to stand against them. When they said to me, oh, well, you look like a nice little girl, I'm sure we can work with you. And I thought, you're about to find out. And they did, because I beat them. But yeah, and it was that patronising. And I beat them at their own tactics too. And my daughters were the only people I could find that would come round the doors with me, and they were teenagers then, because we didn't have capacity. And I remember knocking doors and people saying, well, if your daughters believe in you so much to be out in the wind, the rain, or sometimes it was sun and the heat, who are we to deny you? And I'm not advocating you drag your kids round. I had no choice but to do it. So, and here I am, and I tried several times to come here. And I think the message is this, you know, when you don't succeed, what I did was take the learning. I would ring people back and say, why didn't you choose me? Not, you know, accusing them for not, but what do I need to do differently? And I learned, and, you know, and eventually I got here. So I just wanted to say that. And yes, I am a feminist, socialist feminist, and that's how I usually introduce myself. That's what I will always be, and have spent a long time, all my political life, trying to end violence against women and girls, and signing up male champions, and worked with the WI in order to do that for some 11 years now. And Sarah, I think, is in the audience. In fact, I think she's sitting in my seat over there. So that's great. So anybody that wants to join that campaign, I'm just sort of lobbying again, really. So I'm going to thank all those who have spoken. I know Jane, unsurprisingly, has another commitment and has to leave. And I'm going to hope that some of these stories have inspired you. But I'm going now to hand over to the CEO of Elect Her, Hannah Stevens, and she's going to be chairing a discussion.
I'm going to pass over to Crystal, our poet.
Oh, Crystal has arrived.
Yes,
Okay.
Thanks for waiting. Yes, I'll just begin. This poem is called Power. Power to stand, power to speak, power to protect, power to make change, power to support others, power to support ourselves, power in connection, power in us all. I used to think power was an object held and pushed toward weak ones to ensure they felt it and saw it fully. Then and only then would power be in full effect. The object could be passed on one to another, but never held by more than one person in any one space. I used to think power was a weapon that could be wielded at the bearer's hand, only to demolish everything in its path with a single command, leaving dust so small that no one could come against them again. I used to think power was a place that could be built up and tower over anyone in its shadow, and when they tried to escape the darkness, power would build higher with nothing to fear. I once met a white woman who would clothe herself in black in order to feel powerful in high places. For this woman, black meant power, but only when put on. I wonder if she also found it ironic as she stared at me, black stretching tightly over my body, black filling every crease and crevice of my limbs. The irony isn't in the absence of power when clothed in black. The irony is in the assumed power in the skin she was already in. I once watched a woman who sat in the middle of the bay when it was winter. She held a giant milkshake in between her hands, and she shivered. She said it made her feel powerful to choose to be cold. Sometimes power gets confused with control. And now, what do I think? I think power isn't an object to be held and given, passed. I think power isn't a weapon. Power doesn't control. Power incites respect, not fear, accountability, justice, never revenge. Power is a substance, an energy, embodied. Power is mine. I think power is mine too. I think power is refined in the quiet, unending nights filled with questions and hope for a new day. I think power is designed for only those with the most gracious minds. I think power is yours. I think power is yours too. Because power isn't a color. No, power isn't a color, it's a substance, an energy. We won't run out of it. We won't. We won't run out of it. It's never lost. True power is never lost. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you.
Bore da and croeso cynnes to you wonderful women joining us today in the Senedd. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's an absolute beautiful sight to see so many of you here. My name's Hannah Stevens and I'm the Chief Executive-elect here. We are a tiny but mighty organisation that is working to support, motivate and equip women to stand for elected office in all spheres of government across Britain. And in response to some of Catherine's comments earlier on, I really hope some of those next steps that you can take can come and join our community. We've got loads of fantastic resources for you all to access, so we're inviting you into that space. Totally honoured to be joined here on this fantastic panel of women, cross-party, from a range of different elected roles, each as important as the other. Fatima Aksoy, welcome, Fatma, is the youth parliamentarian for Newport East and has stepped in to join us at the very last minute. So well done and thank you for joining us. Faye Jones, MP, welcome Faye, won her seat of Brecon and Radnorshire at the 2019 general election and has been a government whip for the past year. Welcome Faye, thank you for coming to join us. Hannah Blythen has been the member of the Senedd for Dilynwch. Hello. I hadn't realised we were missing that. Hannah Blythen has been the member of the Senedd for Dilynwch since 2016 and is currently the youngest member of the Welsh Government. Hannah is a proud trade unionist and remains a staunch advocate for the LGBTQIA+ community. Welcome, Hannah. Councillor Bablin Mollick, the Right Honourable, the Lord Mayor of Cardiff. Yes. Bablin is the 118th Lord Mayor of Cardiff. She is the 16th female Lord Mayor of Cardiff. She is the first woman of colour Mayor of Cardiff and the first Muslim Mayor of Cardiff. Oh yeah. Welcome, Bablin. And Senedd Williams is a member of Senedd for South Wales West, and she is Plaid Cymru's spokesperson for social justice and is deeply committed to equality, currently sitting on 4 Senedd cross-party groups, including the Senedd cross-party group on violence and, against women and children, which she chairs. Welcome, Senedd. So I'd love to just start this conversation by just hearing a little bit more from each of you about your personal journey and what that looked like. All of the women that are joining us here today are exploring what democracy means for them and how they want to participate. And once we're in politics, it's quite easy to forget what it's like not being in politics. So I'd love to just tell me, when was it that you first got into campaigning or activism or party politics? And when was it that you realised you actually wanted to take that step forward and represent your communities? Bablin? Can I start with you?
When was it? When I started, I studied science, and I never thought I would enter politics. Wanted to stay away. You know, family were into politics. I have my sister, Councillor Jasmine Chowdhury, who sits on the opposite side in the chamber, but nonetheless, you know, there was politics, and we always voted, we always believed in democracy. That was ingrained in us, but never thought I'll get into politics. What changed it all was life experience, and you heard some of the life experiences earlier from the speakers. You know, after becoming a mum of young children, being in academia, and then finding it difficult to secure employment, that was one of the reasons I started realizing that inequality in society as a whole. And I started working very much, like Catherine earlier said, with women's organisations after doing my PhD. And you have to some extent, practice what you preach, as Catherine said earlier. So I was training women to become community speakers, community leaders, to campaign. And I thought, well, if I want change to happen, I can't be complaining from the sideline. I need to get in there. So, and we do often say, you know, these decisions made in chambers like this, it affects every one of us in life. And if you're not happy seeing what's happening, then get in. And that's what got me in. So I'll pass it on.
Thanks for sharing. That's really powerful, Babylon. Faye, can I ask you what motivated you to first get involved?
Yeah, so can you hear me? So I had a slightly different journey into politics in that I grew up in a very political household. My dad was a member of Parliament himself, but he lost his seat in 1997 when I was 12 years old. So I didn't really... I had no idea that I was going to end up doing it. And I have to say, I'm a bit of a freak in comparison to what you've heard today. It does take a long time to get selected. You have to keep trying time and time again, unless you're a weirdo like me who just gets selected for a safe seat and there's a snap general election 2 weeks later. So I had no preparation. So I would really say, yes, absolutely, work for it, keep trying, aim for maybe starting out at a county council, but also take a chance and roll the dice. Don't just, yes, absolutely have a plan and a strategy, but there will come a day where an opportunity just breaks your way, and absolutely go for it. So I'm sorry to be the freak that just ended up here by accident, but that's kind of the way it happened.
I mean, it's key. Everybody has very, very different experiences. I think a massive piece is that it's not the same for everybody. Your journey is very different. So that's such a great example. And you're absolutely not a freak. But lucky, unusual.
Unique.
Unique.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Fab. Hannah. I think they will work when you start speaking. I think the lovely AV team.
Yeah, is this working? Yeah. There we go. Thank you. I should trust in the ICT in the Senedd chamber, shouldn't I? Yes, I think first thing for me to say is that I serve the community where I grew up, where I went to school. And if you'd have asked me when I was at school if I'd be sat here in the Senedd chamber or stood where somebody sat today speaking in the Senedd chamber, would have thought, I wouldn't believed in the slightest, not least, and it wasn't because devolution didn't exist then, but it's because I didn't think it was an option for me, because politicians didn't look like me. Let's be honest, they looked still predominantly men in grey suits. I couldn't relate. I couldn't see myself in them, and they didn't speak like me as well. And I think, but whilst I wasn't political in a traditional sense growing up, I don't have come from a family of politicians, and I was kind of the sort of person who, if something was wrong, I'd say something. And I remember my mum once saying to me, well, Hannah, you can stamp your feet and complain, or you can stand up and do something about it. So this terrifies my teachers when I go back to my old school now. But I remember one of my first political acts as such, because I think we often think of politics as party politics, but it's so much more than that. And so my first political act as such was me and a few other stage just sitting in what was our top yard at school, because girls weren't allowed to wear trousers. Now, we weren't successful at the time, but when I go back to my school now, guess what? The girls can wear trousers. So for me, it's about... my teachers don't clap that. They look really worried, like I'm inciting some kind of rebellion now when we go back. But I think, for me, it's really, really important that this is what a politician looks like, you know, it's all of us and it's for all of us. And this is why events like this are so important to me, because, you know, you literally can't be what you can't see. And as I was walking over from my office to come this morning, there was this incredible wall of noise that I heard, and it was all women's voices. And it was so inspiring. And, you know, I want that to be the norm, not the exception in the future. And for me, I kind of took the leap eventually. I spent a lot of time as an activist and a campaigner. And I think it goes back to what my mum said about stamping my feet. I can complain about things or I can put myself forward. But it's only because of the support and empowerment of others I came in through the trade union movement. And I often say they not only helped shape my values in terms of the policies and things that I campaign for, but literally gave me my voice by giving me that platform and empowering me to have my say and ultimately helping me put myself forward.
Thanks, Hannah. Fatma, can I ask you, when did your interest in democracy begin?
Can you hear me? Yeah. My political career actually started with immigration at the start. My family members were all either asylum seekers or refugees. So from a really young age, I started interpreting for them, for example, like attending to Welsh Refugee Council, hospitals, or calling up migrant help or their lawyers. So immigration just gave me an interest. That's why today I want to become an immigration lawyer. And from that, seeing the UK Home Secretary always making the laws, I had an interest in politics then. When helping asylum seekers and refugees, I was getting like the organisations included as well. Like if they needed financial support, I was getting like East included, or any other organisations that provide financial support for any asylum seekers or refugees. So from there, once in the East group, they said that you can apply to become a Welsh Youth Parliament. I never thought of becoming a Welsh Youth Parliament because, you know, I wasn't really interested. I was a young Labour Party member because I really loved Jessica Morden. I really liked Jane Bryant because of them helping asylum seekers and refugees whenever I needed them to. So I was like, let me go for it, because, you know, from the start, I was actually a really quiet girl. Like, I got my primary school teacher there, Mrs. Smith from Mainly Primary School. She knows. She knows how quiet I was and how shy I was in the class. But now, you know, when she sees me in the events, me speaking up every time, and she cries herself. Yeah, she cries herself. So, you know, it's just, you know, I went for it, and it was COVID that time. It was really hard for me to get my voice heard, but Maindy is a community for us. Like, you just get your voice heard in Maindy. So I went into Maindy and I went to a few mosques. I had the assembly done via online with Maindy Primary School. I'd done some assemblies with other schools, recorded assemblies with high schools. Some showed them, some didn't, but I still done it and sent it over. And at the end, they rang me up. They said, congratulations. So now I'm the member of the Welsh Youth Parliament for Newport East.
What a fantastic story. Amazing. Sinead, how about you? Where were you first inspired and encouraged?
Well, similarly, I don't come from a family of politicians, but I come from a very political family in the sense that both my parents were from mining families. So for me, I guess it was more about class justice. And similarly, from what we heard from Catherine earlier, you know, both my grandmothers, who were very intelligent women, from what I gather, I knew one of them, the other died before I was born, you know, weren't allowed to go on with their education. But the grandmother I did know, my Mamgi, she would be the type of person who would help people in the street. And that's a very Valleys thing. My family come from the Rumney Valley. And, you know, when people got into trouble or they felt that there was something not right, my grandmother would write. So she would take up their cause. And I think that was the kind of politics that inspired me. But similarly to what Hannah was saying, you know, I joined Plaid Cymru when I was a student. Really, one of the reasons, because I come from a Labour family, but one of the reasons I joined Plaid was where I lived in the southeast Wales. It was very male, stale, grey, certain type of very powerful male Labour politicians who'd been there for 40 years and everything was done a certain way. So I think for me, Plaid was a socialist alternative, and just got into that. But I never took an active role in politics until, again, what you were saying, you see someone who sounds like you. And for me, that person was Leanne Wood. She became leader of Plaid Cymru. She, again, championed women, started to encourage, you know, I knew her just through our interests. I used to meet, you know, in different events. I was not an active campaigner, but she sort of said, come on, put your money where your mouth is. We need people like you. And so, yeah, encouraged me on. But again, I want to come back to job sharing. I'm absolutely passionate about job sharing because when I became a mother, I was a journalist. When I became a mother, you know, this was early 2000s, well, more or less 2000, and you basically had to pretend your children didn't exist in the workplace. That was what it was like. If you wanted to get on, you had to just pretend they were invisible and they didn't exist. You weren't allowed to talk about them. And so I didn't have support, the right support from family. I couldn't afford childcare. And I left the workplace. Luckily, being a journalist, you can odd job as a journalist. You can do freelance work. So that's what I did just to keep my hand in, to keep those networks going. But it was job sharing that got me back into the workplace in Swansea University. A public sector has been far more progressive than the private sector on this. And certainly some professions like journalism and definitely politics were not progressive in this sense at that time. So, you know, I am absolutely passionate about making sure that we can job share, because it's not enough to encourage women to say, you belong here. This place has to fit you too. We can't put round pegs in square holes or vice versa. This place has to also adjust, and this culture of politics has to also adjust. So that's what that's what helped me stand again. I was like, really, I'm not going to stand. I came up through community activism, became chair of my local Cylch TAV, the play group. That was the first thing I was elected to. Then became a parent governor in school, became chair of governors, was involved in many community groups who were campaigning for different things, became a community council, became chair of the community council, tried to get elected for county council, lost by 40 votes, a little bit, but I was like, ooh, you know, that's okay. Worked really hard and was told by people like Leanne Wood in my party, come on, we need you in the Senedd, we need people with your experience. But it was that imposter syndrome. I haven't been one of these people who've been a researcher for a politician for 20 years and know this place like the back of my hand. I was absolutely scared stiff. I'm still quite scared. When I have to stand up, I sit over there, when I have to stand up and speak to the First Minister and hope that he doesn't shoot me down in flames. But, you know, we learn, and you learn every day, and not being afraid of that you don't know. As long as you're willing to learn, and if you have allies, both male and female, who are going to help you in that journey, you can make it.
Fab, thank you. Wow. What women... Amazing, thank you. I want to remind all of you that if you've got questions for the panel, we're using Mentimeter, which is this incredible technology. If you just, on your phones, if you go to www.menti.com and you enter the code, which is on the screens, 74820585, by the power of that technology, your questions will land in my lap and I will be able to deliver them to the panel. Isn't it wild? So I just want to ask a little bit about, I mean, I don't think anyone here actually needs persuading, but why do you think it's important that we have more women at the table? Like, what do women bring when we have balanced gender of participation in our politics? What is the difference that that's going to make? Senedd, how about we start with you?
Well, the things we were talking about, I mean, you know, making sure that workplaces are fit for women generally have the majority of care responsibilities, either for children or for other members of the family, for people who they care for with disabilities or elderly parents. You know, I had to leave a job because I was helping my mother care for my father who had Alzheimer's. I also had to, as I say, leave. I was on quite a good trajectory in the BBC and had to basically leave because it just didn't suit, you know, the fact that I had children. I felt that the culture there wasn't wasn't inclusive of me as a young mother. So those type of things have to be completely factored into all the decisions that are made in this chamber and in council chambers and in Westminster when we are looking at policies, as you quite rightly said, that, you know, shape all of our lives. So that making that workplace, you know, this place doesn't have a creche. You know, the Swansea University where I worked before I was elected had a creche. So, you know, that is for one thing. I mean, we do have, when this place was set up, there's term time working, although actually that's not really true because the expectations of women, of politicians, we have to change that culture that you're available all the time, that you don't have to give any time to your family or whoever is, you know, part of your life. You know, you have to pretend that you're, you know, so I think that really needs to change. You know, I catch myself sometimes going home, and my daughter's now university, and I think that was a factor. She was quite high maintenance, my daughter. As daughters can be. She'll be brilliant. You know, when she'd gone to university when I stood. My son was still at home, slightly easier. But I do find myself now, like, going in, you know, any news from school, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm like, I know that I'm itching to get to that laptop or my phone or... You know, we've got to stop that. We have to make sure that this job gives time for people to do the things that they need to do, both male and female, but it obviously lands more on women. And I think the other thing is, as you're talking about workplace being fit, obviously I was elected during COVID, so I just wanted to share that a little bit. That was difficult. As a woman, I've always worked in big open plan offices everywhere that I've lived, and you can stick your head around somebody's desk and say, how do I do this? Usually to another woman, because you don't want to show the man you don't know what you're doing. And you couldn't do that. That was really hard. But on the other hand, it's provided a great opportunity. Those cross-party groups you were mentioning that I am part of and I chair, and the committees that we have here in the Senedd, the clerks all tell me, who've been here obviously longer than I have, are telling us that the type of women that we can have as expert witnesses who come to talk to us or just come and listen to some of those cross-party groups is much more diverse than it used to be. Because now they can do it. They can do it from their laptop. They can do it, you know, from their place of work. They don't have to come all the way to Cardiff and have that intimidation of coming into this building. So, you know, that's a way of building confidence. But you would not believe the pushback that's been in this chamber, usually from male members. Oh, it's not proper to do it hybrid. Why are these people on Zoom? You know, we should all be in the room and we should all be able to go for a drink after. You know, that culture still exists. It's not as bad here, I don't think, as it is in Westminster, from what I've heard. But it does exist. There is still that club. And, you know, if you want to go home, you're coming out for a meal? No, actually, I'm going home to see my son. Because I want to know what he did in school today, for that not to be odd and weird and detrimental to you anymore. That's what needs to change.
Normalising a work-life balance. Yeah. Thank you for that, Senedd. Babylon, can I come to you? What do women bring?
What do women bring? Well, women bring the world, everything. You know, life experiences, as we heard earlier. As I said, we were trying to engage women to become community figures in the trainings. And we used to say, you know, these people are making decisions for us, you know. And if you were making those decisions, what would you prioritise? What would you think about, you know? And I've realised that since being elected, you know, that women come to me with the problems or concerns. Women from different ethnic backgrounds, not in my ward, you know, outside my ward, would come to me with their casework because they felt I can understand them. They felt I can relate to them. So I can understand what the concerns are and work on that and support them. So that's one element of it. The other element is, as you were saying earlier, is changing the culture of discussion, changing the priorities that these decision makers are making. I took a motion on public toilets, would you believe, you know, to council. And, you know, some of the men were grinning, you know, about this motion. But it's an important, you know, women having those facilities, accessible facilities, is something that the council has a significant role to play in. So, and we talked about women, you know, the biological system of women that a lot of the men in that chamber wouldn't even consider, wouldn't know that these were issues that women had to deal with day to day in. And I remember a colleague in the chamber saying, I can't believe I've heard about moon pads in the council chambers, tweeting it. And I thought, well, it is changing that and understanding different perspectives of life. And, we are more than 50% in population. So why aren't our real concerns being heard in the chamber? Because we're not in there. So it's important we take over and we do get in there and we change those discussions, we change the culture, as you said. I get quite often questioned when I go to different events and things, how do you feel being called Lord Mayor? Shouldn't it be Lord Mayoress or Lady Mayoress? I say, no, it's the position, it's not the person. Yeah. And, yes, we're used to seeing 100 plus men in those positions, but I'm the 16th, and we've got a long way to go before we readjust that balance. So we do need more women to come forward and take those positions to show that Lord Mayors can be a woman of colour too. Yeah.
Thank you, Beblin. We hear a lot in the media about politics being so divisive and party politics feeling like different teams that are combating against each other. But actually, behind the scenes, we hear a lot of work, honestly, about the fantastic collaboration that happens cross-party. And actually, that's where some of the really important stuff happens. So I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about that, perhaps share with us some of the positive opportunities that you've had working with other women across the House in some of those key decision-making. Faye, could I...
Yeah, I mean, I can think of an example right away. There's a project on the corner of my constituency, the Global Centre for Rail Excellence, which is right at the very edge of Powys, where it meets Neath Port Talbot. And it's been really brilliant working with Christina Rees on it. We kind of taken the party politics out of it, and we're just trying to get both Welsh and UK governments to support that project. And it's really easy working. It really does make life so much easier. I'd never met Senedd before today, and I walked into the green room and she said, "Oh, would you come to my cross-party group on Friday?" I'm like, yes, absolutely fantastic. It's just ingrained in us to work together, isn't it? And I think the other thing that women bring to political life is that sense of caring, and I really don't mean to do that down, but I speak as a whip. I'm someone that looks after 25 members of Parliament, make sure that they're okay, make sure if they're planning to rebel or whatever, but really I want to make sure that they're all right, because I'm really worried about our democracy at the moment. I can see a lot of really talented women thinking about leaving Westminster, and I'm really concerned about that. And it is about making it much more family friendly. I do not know why Westminster sits until 10 o'clock on a Monday night. Figure that one out. Why on earth can't we do 9 to 5? I do not get it. I think we would still pack in the same amount of hours, so I'm sure we could achieve it. But we also have a very arcane method of voting where you physically have to walk through the lobby. And we had to vote on Tuesday night 18 times. It took 4 hours. Now, I love Parliament. It is a beautiful, fantastic, majestic place. But I do think we need to ask ourselves some questions about whether our processes are fit for the future and fit for the type of members of Parliament that we need to be attracting. So I think, as well as that obvious point that when you have more women in the room, you make better policy. It's just a fact. You do, because you have a plurality of thought, and it really helps. I think you improve people's welfare just by having more women asking questions and checking in on people. It's just in our nature to go around and work together, make sure everyone's all right, and make sure, I want to make sure that we have fantastic members of Parliament from every party. And I speak as your token Tory in the room this morning. I work so well with colleagues from right across the House that I think we all need to look out for each other. And when I've had instances of social media abuse or whatever it might be, it's the women from the other parties that ring me and say, "Are you okay?" And that's so valuable. And I make sure I ring them and make sure that they're all right. So I think, again, more than just making better policy, you get better politicians when you have more women in the room.
That's really powerful. Hannah, how about here in this space? How do women come together? What are the fantastic opportunities that you've had working?
Well, I just smiled at Senedd and she flicked her eyebrows at me. So I think the way in which this chamber was constructed was meant to be different anyway. It's less confrontational, you're not opposite one another. Occasionally it does get a little bit rowdy, and sometimes there's a little bit of heckling, and I may have done it occasionally myself when you get really wound up about something. But I think what Sean is, I think sometimes there's things like perhaps myself and Senedd would fundamentally disagree on, but there's so much more that we do have common ground on. And I think, a lot of the stuff when you see, particularly, in the House of Commons, that kind of confrontational approach, it's just showmanship. It's not good politics. It doesn't make for better policy. And quite frankly, it puts people off. So sometimes you might get passionate because you care about something. There's a difference about being passionate and kind of just grandstanding for the sake of it. So I think sometimes, when Sean and I, perhaps, having questions, somebody did comment to me once, it was like we were just having a conversation on the floor of the Senedd Chamber in terms of challenging one another and like recognising where we have things in common. And I think just touching on, what we were all saying about the difference that women brings to chambers and council chambers, the House of Commons chamber, the Senedd chamber as a whole. You're obviously right, we were underrepresented majority, and it not only changes the face of our politics, quite literally, it changes the focus. And it's not just about what we say in here, it's what we're saying is when policy is being made. And it reminds me of we've talked about COVID in here and the kind of challenging time of being a junior member of government when, we're actually responding in rapid real time to, serious issues and things changing around restrictions. And I think women sometimes bring an element of kind of their lived experience and empathy towards that. Because one thing, and I don't think I'm giving away any confidences now, hopefully, but one thing that springs to mind, I remember we were talking about something, and it was about kind of, things within regulations about being compassionate and what that meant. And I actually used in this government discussion a real life example of my elderly aunt, who sadly is no longer with us now, but she was living on her own. She was isolated. She didn't need anybody to go into a house to help her dress or to care for her in that instance, but she did need somebody probably to take her food in and unpack it and make sure she was okay. And then when I was watching the First Minister back on the press conference later that week, he used a very similar example. So there are little things you can do to influence, but I think we bring that kind of empathetic, pragmatic approach, which is based on lived experience as well, and understanding actually more how a policy, I often say as a minister, I get these policies put in front of you and you think it looks fabulous on paper, but it doesn't always work the way you intended in practice, and it's about actually having that lived experience to influence it and make things better for everybody.
Yeah, thanks. Fatma, Youth Parliament really feels like a great model for us. It's much more diverse in terms of gender and ethnic representation. What do you think are some of the advantages of that? Like, how does it feel being in that environment?
Well, it feels absolutely great, to be honest, because, at the end, we're a voice for young people. During my time in the Youth Parliament, I was actually in the Mental Health Committee, and we've just, been around in the events and researching what young people thinks about the mental health issues, what they think about the system, what we need to improve. So at the end, we made the reports, and with the report, we came up in the chamber and we had an event day over here with yw'r, and we had Rocio here with Jane Bryant. Leen Eagle the Deputy Minister of Mental Health couldn't attend, but at the end we had an event online actually on Zoom, a live event, and we talked about our reports to get our voice heard for mental health. But during my time in the Youth Parliament, I actually been in lots and lots of different experiences. For example, I got chosen and I had a private meeting with Prince William in the Senedd where we talked about the issues in young people in Wales. I went to the NHS Confederation Conference last year and had a speech there by the NHS leaders. Other than that, actually, I'm also a Newport Youth Council member, a Young People's Board member for the Home Office, and I'm also in a project for young people's mental health. Our Mind, Our Future Gwent is a project by Promo Cymru and Mind Cymru. And I also recently actually got selected as the president of Coleg Gwent in Torfaen. And during all these positions, I, went into different events. It's, totally off topic from Youth Parliament. I went to International Women's Day in the Riverfront. I went to, to be honest, many places that I can't really remember myself. Just had speeches everywhere, to be honest. And I did say I'm helping asylum seekers and refugees. Actually, as a youth parliament, what has happened is I had more networking. I'm Kurdish from Turkey, but now I have more networking from Kurdish from Iraq, Kurdish from Iran, Kurdish from Syria. So I'm helping all of them like I done to my family, and like what I do, like I mentioned, emailing their MPs, emailing their lawyers. Actually, some of their lawyers now have got like enough from me, like they don't even want to speak to me anymore because I question them a lot. They don't answer their clients, but you know, I'm trying to get an answer for the clients. And the clients doesn't know the English, so I'm trying to help them. I book the appointments. If necessary, I actually attend to the appointments as well. If the person wants me to come. Is actually mainly mans, because I think there's more man asylum seekers going on in Wales right now, like more Kurdish men. So with doing all this volunteering and all this volunteering for Kurdish people and asylum seekers and refugees and everything, on March, I actually got an award, Leader of the Future Award, in the Nation of Sanctuary Awards 2023. And then... And then recently, last month, I got nominated again, and I got an award from Gavo, Inspirational Awards. Wow. So 2 awards in a year.
Well deserved.
Yeah, so rather than that, I help my father's business.
It's incredible family.
In my spare time. Yeah. He has a kebab shop takeaway.
So you've already taken on casework. I wasn't sure that was a part of the responsibility of a youth parliamentarian, but I'm thrilled you have.
That's right, yeah. So
fantastic.
I've just been, you know, socialising a lot, really active everywhere.
Great.
And yeah.
Great. So we've already talked and celebrated today that this is the first legislative body in the world to have had gender balance. I think another round of applause for that. And now there is this opportunity for diverse and equal representation to become legislation as part of the Senedd reform. So outside of that legislative agenda, can I just ask each of you, what do you think we can and should be doing outside of this building to encourage more women to consider politics as part of their future? Bablin, can I start with you?
More women to consider politics as a future. To be honest, you know, I know there's many parties have taken different stands and different ways to make this happen, and Labour have very clear stance on these matters. I'm a Lib Dem, and you know, we had the first female leader in Wales, a party leader, and you know, we've somehow attracted a lot of women, you know, and I know when I signed up, I always voted Lib Dem for various issues, okay? When I was a student, it was the first year of them introducing tuition fees. My whole family is Labour, okay? But I'm a Lib Dem. I'm in a bit of a thorn amongst them. And then that was when I was a student. Tuition fees were introduced for the first time when I was a student, so I didn't like that. Iraq War, didn't like that. So I didn't sign up for Labour. I did sign up for Lib Dem for those reasons, really. But since signing up, I signed up quite later on. I signed up, I think, when I was in my final years of my PhD as a member of a political party. And as soon as I signed up, from the very next day, you know, they were trying to encourage me as a party, you know, to stand in various elections. So in 2012, I stood in local council election, didn't get elected. You know, as Catherine said, you know, there will be setbacks, you know. You work so hard and you think, I can't believe it didn't happen, you know, and there's various reasons it doesn't happen. So I didn't get elected. I think a few months later, there was a big by-election, Cardiff South and Penarth by-election, MP by-election happening when Alan Michael stood down in Cardiff South and Penarth. And I was the Lib Dem candidate. At that time, there was a coalition government in power. And so all of a sudden, I had to really step up because this was a by-election. This wasn't a general election. All the focus was on this by-election. And being in coalition to a party, so there was a lot of media attention. I had to skill myself up quite quickly. But for the party to put me in that place, it just showed that they were keen to see me progress. I didn't get elected then too. I had many ministerial visits. It was a different life. It was normally by-elections are 3 months. This one went on for 6 months. So it was a long draw, but I had an incredible experience during that by-election. And I got myself known in the party. I remember attending party conference and there was people wearing support Bablin Mollick in Cardiff South, so encouraging people to come and help with the elections here. So I got myself known, and the party actually pushed me to get myself known because they saw something in me, I guess. So although we didn't have all this women-only shortlists, etc., when you recognise talent, is to push them forward.
Yeah.
Because I would not have put myself forward. We think all the negative why we shouldn't put myself forward.
That's fantastic to hear that the party.
But party does encourage you, and that's why we did get those women. I didn't get elected in Cardiff South and Penarth, and then the next time I stood was the council elections in Kincoed, and Kincoed is one of the key wards for Lib Dems, and in Wales. And that's where they placed me because they wanted to see me succeed, and I did get elected there only by, I think, 24 votes. It was 2 votes in the first count and then 24 votes. So very close, so the other way, opposite way around. So I got elected that time in 2017 by 24 votes. Last election, we secured more than almost 60% of the vote, and it just shows that when you put the work into it, when the community see that you're putting that work into it, you do get rewarded. Yeah. And so, yes, there was a long drain, before I got elected, but I did get there, and hopefully it's done good.
Thank goodness you did. Hannah, can I ask you, what do you think we need to be doing to encourage more women into politics?
Yeah, thanks. So I think I should start by doing what they say in this chamber and by declaring an interest that I'm the minister that's been tasked by the First Minister of taking through the legislation on gender quotas. So I look forward to doing that and working with people like Senedd to make that happen in here. But, as Boblin said, there's mechanisms the individual parties had, and I was selected on an all-women shortlist. And there'd been a woman representing that area for me, and I don't doubt if we hadn't had that shortlist, they would have said, it's time for a man now. Not like it hadn't been time for men for the last 150 years. But so I think there's those party mechanisms and all things, and I think all the parties can do more on that. We can always do more and build on that in terms of how we empower, encouraging people for the representation. And I think events like this are really good. And one of the things I say, I think, is telling our stories is really, really important to kind of encourage and empower others, because for too long, some things we haven't talked about, particularly as women in politics, because they're often used by others, even in our own parties, as something then to kind of to criticise as well. So I've often been very honest about the fact that when I said before that it was the trade union movement that gave me my voice as well as my values, I was shy at school as well, in secondary school, but I had a really difficult time in secondary school because I was bullied, and it was what I realise now was homophobic bullying, but other children saw something in me that I hadn't yet seen in myself, and it literally knocked the confidence out of me, and it took my time working in the trade union to build that back up. And I think, I think it's really important that I talk about that, even though some people might use it as a way to criticise you. Although I read something very good recently in a book that said, don't mistake confidence for competence. It's not the same thing. But I think one of the things I said, just because, our voices are different, I may be more softly spoken than some of my counterparts, but it doesn't mean that my voice doesn't have equal worth or equal power. And I think we need to remember that. But I think telling our stories, having events like this communities right across the country is really, really important.
Thank you. And we actually have a workshop this afternoon which is about how to tell my story. So some of the women here will have signed up to that so that we can really explore that, because that is exactly, as you say, is so, so important. So now I'm taking some of the questions that have come in through the power of technology into my lap. We are being positive, we are being optimistic, we are creating sisterhood, but it's not easy, your jobs, and we have to also be kind of realistic about that as well. So one of the questions has come in: how do women protect ourselves from misogynistic and sexist abuse, some of which comes from within political parties?
Nice, easy one to begin with there. Can I just say one tiny thing on the previous question before, because I really wanted to say this. I think the Conservative Party has probably got the longest way to go in terms of getting more women involved, despite the fact that we had 3 female prime ministers. That's great, but we need more women, and you need female leaders within the Conservative Party to put themselves forward and do that work. So I want to shout out Susie Davis, who's been doing that for years. So thank you very much, Susie.
Nice, lovely, thank you.
How do we tackle the misogynistic abuse? I wish I knew. I think part of it is by being here and by providing a comfort network. Because when I was first elected in 2019, I replied to every tweet. Every person who tweeted me, I was like, no, you're wrong, and I'm going to tell you why you're wrong. Just stop doing that. Can I just say that now? Don't do that. You have to develop a thick skin. You have to develop some networks, and that is usually your female friends who know what you're going through. So I think if you're asking how do we eradicate misogynistic abuse, you're asking the wrong question. It's how do you protect yourself from it? And there are things you have to do. You know, you do have to listen to some quite important and severe security advice when you are, when you become elected. And you have to be very honest with yourself about what are you prepared to put you and your family through. But I will say, please don't let that abuse put you off. Yes, it's there. Yes, it's very uncomfortable. And it is horrible when it's gendered or it's threats of sexual violence. It's appalling, and I don't want to minimise that. But there are things in place. There are, I like to say, and I know I'm slightly joking, when I get a death threat, that's fine. I could deal with that. The police are there to help me. It was dealt with incredibly quickly. What I don't like is you're fat, you're ugly, and you're a Tory. So there are things there to help you when that happens. So you just have to factor that in and know that your party will look after you, your parliament will look after you, whatever organisation it is. But please don't let it put you off, because I hear so many women who say, oh, but the abuse, it's there. I'm really sorry it's there. And I think also the one thing I would love to do is not talk about abuse. I get phoned up by journalists all the time saying, will you talk about your death threat and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, done it. Let's not give it too much attention, because it's a small part of the job. And I'm afraid it's there, but you are going to be there to protect you, and there'll be a lot of people around you who'll be willing to stand with you.
I think that's a fantastic answer, Faye. Thank you so much. And I really want to also just acknowledge that receiving a death threat should not be a normal part of your life, right? And it's a sad state of affairs that is something you've had to just learn to deal with. And I want to also give a little shout out to Glitch, who's a fantastic organisation that really are working to protect the online space so that we can find joy in it, because there's some fantastic things. And they've worked with us at Elect Her to create a self-led toolkit, a short course you can go through that teaches you about how to update your privacy settings and all the different platforms. Some really, really practical advice that all of you can have access to, just so that you can get ahead of the game in that, just starting to understand how to protect ourselves and not be in a place of protection, but proaction in terms of owning that space. So that's an extra piece there. Does anyone else want to add something to that before we move on?
Just really briefly, I definitely agree that, yes, we need, you develop ways of protecting yourself. I don't think it's right that we have to have this skin of a rhino. I was told that. You just have to deal with it. And yeah, you do. But you know what? Mute button.
I love the mute button.
I completely agree with you. Don't feed the trolls. Don't argue. You're never going to persuade them. It's not weak. It's not weak to answer back. It can be quite empowering, but yeah, mute button, so you don't see that rubbish on your timeline. Hannah and I, every time we talk about LGBTQ rights in this place, we get an awful lot of abuse. We're on exactly the same page on that, obviously. And just mute. But I would like to say as well, it is also about what we talked about earlier about women in the room. It's about culture change. We've seen this with the Me Too movement. Culture can be changed. We shouldn't just accept that it won't change forever. And we've seen that. We've seen it in the political parties. We've seen it in some of our institutions, like the WRU, for example, some of our major national institutions. There is a way to change, and the way to change is to have women on the board, women on being trustees, women being in governing bodies, women being in politics. That is the way to make sure that we eradicate that. I am hopeful that we can eradicate some of those awful misogynistic attitudes.
Yeah, thank you so much. And also we have to acknowledge the additional challenges and barriers that women with different lived experiences have on as well as additional layers there. And we've had one question in, which is, what actions do you think need to be taken to ensure that racism and prejudice is never a reason that ethnic minority do not step forward for elected office? Bablin, do you mind if I come to you on that one?
You know, since becoming the Lord Mayor, something that I've said to people, it's no longer about those that doubted me. It's about those that doubt themselves. And even with the previous, you know, so I want to see confidence in people like me to come forward now. Because I've done it, so can you. And I want you to believe in yourself that you can do this. And that's the big step that we need to take initially, that you need to see that I've done it, you can too. And that's when you step forward. I think, you know, being the first on various occasions, quite often I take more on my shoulders to prove that actually, you know, those that doubted me, actually, I can do this role. I can do it really well, you know. So I probably do far more engagements and far more, you know, going around trying to prove that to people. But now I see it from the other side and I think, hang on, I'm not trying to prove anyone anything anymore, but I want to see more people like me come forward. Yeah. So they don't doubt themselves, and that's what we need to do. We need to step forward, to move forward. And when we have the people, you know, when we have the diversity that we have in this chamber today, that's when culture will change. All this, you know, abuse that we get on social media, that's when it will change. But we need more women to step forward to make that change. Women from different background, diversity, be it from colour, LGBTQ, disability. We need women to step forward and make that change happen.
Absolutely. And on that note, I guess that sort of leads us nicely. I mean, we can come back to that point if anyone else wants to add to that piece. But on that note, we have had a question about what can we be doing to encourage more disabled women into politics? So does anyone want to respond to that?
Do you want me to say something? Sure. So I work with people with sight loss in my day job. So I do have another day job alongside Lord Mayor and everything else. So as I said, women try to take on everything and prove themselves in every way. So I do work with people with sight loss, and right from being able to vote, you know, there's barriers at each stage with engagement with democracy for people with disability. And, you know, we heard from Sarah earlier, you know, fantastic role model, you know, and that's what we need more of. And even going back to the previous answer I gave is we need people from diverse backgrounds, not only ethnicity, religion, disability. We need role models like Sarah to come forward to make it happen. Because they raise the case for people with disability. They raise the case to make people understand what those barriers are, you know, that people are experiencing, right from voting to making their voice heard. And they change things. So more people step forward from all backgrounds, those changes will come.
And to also acknowledge that people, you know, everybody with a disability has a very different lived experience. They're not a monolith. There's different barriers depending on what your own individual experience is. Senedd, do you want to say something?
I just want to say briefly, you know, it's those intersectional barriers that we need to think about, isn't it? So, you know, you are disabled, you are a woman, you are from an ethnic minority background, for example. You know, one thing that struck me, I agree with the barriers, so the practical barriers, things like the voting, we've talked about that in the chamber here, about making just voting accessible, easier for people. But also it's about, for me, as I get the socioeconomic barriers that can often follow from those intersectional characteristics. You know, when I stood, those last 6 weeks of your election campaign are absolute madness, and you basically have to dedicate if you really want to get elected, you've got to dedicate yourself full time to it. In that last 6 weeks, which is the real, you know, hub of the campaign, you know, I had to take unpaid leave from my job. I was lucky I had a husband who could keep me. But if I had been a single mother, if I'd have been a person with disability who had increased costs, who you know, how would I been able to do it? So I would like to see things like the access to elected office fund that Jane had talked about earlier, extended to take into account some of those other intersectional barriers that mainly women face into getting into politics, because I think there is some work to do there, because we not only need, you know, all those different protected characteristics represented in this place, we need people from different economic classes represented in this place. I mean, generally, from what I've seen, this place is quite representational. It seems far more normal, sorry, Faye, than Westminster in that regard, in that it does represent the experiences, economic experiences generally of the people of Wales, but it isn't good enough. It's no way diverse enough in that regard. So I would just say we need to think about those intersectional barriers that mainly women encounter too.
And can I also, I'm going to keep giving shout outs to elect her. We have a fund called Fund Her, which is set up to support women who are candidates that need a little bit of extra money. But that money is not for the campaign. It is not to print leaflets. That money is to buy yourself new trainers when you've got holes in them. That money is to buy the quick food that costs a bit more because it's pre-prepared because you need to eat quickly whilst you're working so hard. And actually we're the only, it's the only fund that exists outside of the political parties that's doing that. So if anybody would like to make a donation, we will ensure it will go straight to women who deserve it. And again, women of all political parties, we're not biased in any of those elections because it's vital. So Fatma, can I ask you, what do you think we need to be doing? We need more young people. That pipeline needs to be starting and it needs to be starting young. What can we be doing, all of us, to be encouraging more young women into politics?
Yeah, well, to start off, I'm coming from a Kurdish background, from a Muslim community. And, you know, being myself with an hijab on right now is actually being a role model for Muslim girls. Like, it's, you know, impressive to see, like, lots of ladies here right now with hijabs on from Muslim community. Because I feel like I'm not alone here, actually. I'm not the only one speaking here because there's some Muslim sisters who wants to actually be in politics as well. My mother, she didn't study as well because my mother's dad didn't let her to. But she really wants all of us to study. And, you know, she's from a Muslim community as well. And, you know, she's just really proud and impressed. And the voice that she couldn't get heard, she wants me to get it heard right now today. So someone like me or from different ethnic minorities, if they actually go in position like me, like 10 years ago, there was no Welsh Parliament around, so no one would have really cared about politics. But now today, there's Welsh Parliament, there's Newport Youth Council, there's projects going on, so more support available for young people. So if young people actually just goes in those organisations, they will get the interest and they will be in politics. There's lots of impressive, you know, young youth parliament members right now. Like, it's not just myself. There's like another 2 or 3 Muslim girls, for example, who are getting their voices heard in the youth parliament. So important. It's just impressive to see it. Yeah. So rather than having everyone, you know, from English and Welsh MSs all around in the Senedd, actually seeing some ethnic minorities and, you know, from different religions, basically just diversity in the Senedd will just be great, especially with women. Every woman is powerful. Every woman is powerful because they go through a lot, to be honest, you know. Right now I see my mum. She goes through a lot, you know. It's not easy to look after 5 children. It's not easy. And, you know, I think if we just put the support in there, the organisation in there, like you've done with the Youth Parliament, young people will be involved because young people just want to get their voices heard in politics.
Fab, thank you. And by the same token, we're not just focused on young people. We want a full diversity. We need the full breadth of lived experience. And this afternoon, one of our workshops is called Midlife Revolution, and that is about claiming your power in your midlife and looking towards your next season and how you can claim power and consider politics at that stage. So can I put it to you as a panel, what can we do to be encouraging older women into politics?
Can I start?
Yes, please, Sinead.
I was 50 when I was elected. Yes. And we've had some very powerful debates in this chamber about what it means to be a middle-aged woman. about perimenopause, about menopause. I am slightly frustrated sometimes that we think if we talk about it, then it's fixed, because it's not. But those, exactly for that kind of reason, that, again, having women in this chamber of all parties, we've all, I remember a very powerful debate where people from all parties were actually sharing pretty personal stories and experiences, and it was what you were saying earlier about your story, people then being able to identify with that, but also this is where, in chambers like this is where policies are made, that we can influence those policies then by our stories and by our experiences. So it's definitely, I've seen by having, especially people like Ellen Jones and Joyce Watson, in positions where they can influence how this place works, that can create a real change. But you have to have those women in the room. And also it's about confidence, as I said, as a younger woman, and possibly because it was bad timing, when I was in my 20s, this place didn't exist. I couldn't, for a minute think of myself going to Westminster, because it felt so alien to me. But, Cardiff felt a bit more manageable. So, having some places of power near to home, in a more familiar place to you where you don't feel so intimidated. You can come to that at any time in life, but it's definitely worth, with all the experiences I've had. I remember my husband said, I said, I can't possibly stand. He said, think of all the stuff you've done. But because it wasn't like the traditional stuff, like I was saying before, you think, does that, but it has totally, being a governor of a school has helped me a tremendous amount in this place. And being a mother who went to play groups and heard what all the other mothers said when they were trying to cope with, perinatal or postnatal depression. I've had experience of hearing those stories, and I bring it to this place. So, yeah, throughout our lives as women, we hear those stories, we're in places where we hear those stories, and to bring them here at whatever time of your life is crucial.
Yeah, thank you for that, Senedd. We've got so many good questions and I can't fit them all in, but I really want to just you've referenced it here, but maybe Babylon, you've told us you have young children through your political career. Can I just ask you about that and kind of how you're juggling the many, many roles that you've been telling us about, as well as your role as a caregiver?
Well, I've got 2 daughters. They're a bit older now, but I had my eldest one first year after completing the first year of my PhD, and the younger one soon after my Viva. Now, even during that phase when they were newborns, if you like, they had lactose intolerance, feeding time was nightmare. So as soon as they went off breastfeeding, their health just plummeted a bit. So I remember days that I would put my daughter to sleep and go into the lab to finish off my experiment at 10 o'clock at night. Make it work. Make it work. I didn't want my children to be the reason why I stopped working. And Jasmine will say the same, if she's still there. Jasmine will say the same. We believe that this shouldn't be a barrier, and we wanted to fight through that, to be honest. And but it did, despite all this fight, as I told you, after completing my PhD, it was a struggle staying in academia and securing employment. I started working, and it's fate, isn't it? I started working in women's organisations. And look where I am now.
The power of the sisterhood.
It's fate, isn't it? So, but, balancing children and young children. When I first got elected, I think my younger one was in primary and second one was in secondary at that time. And meetings, evening meetings, etc. But to be honest, and, they say behind every successful man, there's a woman. Behind every successful woman, there often is a male figure, father or dad. In my case, certainly, it was my husband, because if he didn't take care of the children when I was attending meetings and etc., it would have been difficult. It took some rounding to get him there, because he came from a family of certain cultural and, belief. I remember my mother-in-law coming and visiting. You're asking my son to cook the rice, and this is the rice cooker, okay, and it's not even challenging. Turning on the rice cooker, he's never poured a glass of water, and you're asking my son to do this, because I was in work, and a concept that his family weren't used to, having a working woman in the family with children. So
the power of teamwork.
Exactly, it is a power of teamwork, totally, so, but he's been very supportive, and I'm here with that support. Amazing. And I couldn't have done it without that support.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Hannah, do you mind if I just chip in a tiny little thing?
Please do, please.
I don't have children. I have 2 Labradors. And I find that I am looked on as a single, not yet married, because I'm getting married in 2 weeks, sorry, just to get that in there. I find that I'm looked on as a single woman with no children. Oh, you're fine. Yeah. You're fine. You've got all the time in the world. You should be out campaigning all day. You should be, out boozing with the boys. You're fine. I'm like, no. Children are an incredibly important responsibility, but so is caring for older parents, so is looking after your goddaughter, so is going to the gym because it's really valuable for your mental health. And I think it's incredibly important that we do everything we can to make this a space for mothers to come into, but also that women say, actually, I'm a public servant. That doesn't mean you get me 24 hours a day. That your responsibilities are valid too.
Thank you, Faye. I think that's a really, really important point. I really appreciate and closing this bit here. Work-life balance is such a strong theme that's come out of today's conversation. Just as we close, I want to offer each of you an opportunity to just share what's like one top tip that you've got for all these women that are here, that are contemplating the next steps that they're taking in democracy. Can you offer them one short top tip that you've got for them?
What top tip as they go for it?
Yeah, or as they contemplate going for it.
I think find a woman that you admire and make her your best friend. I think if any woman came up to me and said, I want to stand for the Conservative Party, I'd get them to move in. Honestly, I would adopt them. So find a woman that you admire and just say, can I have a coffee with you? Can you be my mentor? Can I just phone you when I've got questions? So just find that one woman and, stick to her like glue, because Susie did that for me.
Oh, Susie's embarrassed now. Actually, Susie was also very nice to me as a candidate once when I first went.
Yay for Susie.
So, going back to what we said about across party lines, I went on sharp end I was the first of the 2016 tranche of candidates for the then Assembly elections to go on there, and I remember very vividly. Susie doesn't even remember this. Her saying to the presenter, "Be nice, we've got a new one," and I was absolutely terrified, and that really helped kind of calm me. Just slightly, I was still terrified, but I think one of the things we talked about today is this idea of what a politician is, and that kind of stereotypical idea. And I think Shauna said about needing to change the culture as well, and it should change to fit us, not the other way around. So one of the things I've often said at events is that actually, you don't have to fit the mould. We need to mould it to fit us. Yeah. And if there's one thing I could leave you with, and the things I should have told my teenage self, is to be yourself and to believe in yourself as well.
Amazing, thank you. Yeah. Fatma?
I wanted to say, we are powerful, so if we stand together, there's nothing we can't accomplish. This government needs our voices too, so just never give up and get your voices heard.
Wow, that's powerful, thank you. Bablin,
one top tip. I think it has to be based on your motivation. Do you want change to happen? Because if you've got the right motivation, you'll make it happen.
I think I would echo what Faye said. It is a challenge, let's not beat about the bush. Politics is a challenging thing to do. It's extremely rewarding, as Catherine said earlier, because you can really help people and, pick your battles. So you're not going to win them all. Just believe that you are doing your best, and that is enough. If you're doing your best, that is enough, and your experience, whatever that experience is absolutely valid and valuable. Because I think as women, especially women who haven't perhaps followed that, as I was saying, that kind of traditional mould or path to politics, we, as well as the gender imposter syndrome, we also think, oh, I haven't got the knowledge, I haven't got the experience. Yes, you do. Yeah. Yes, you do. That's my top tip. Yeah.
Thank you. Wow, look at these powerful women sharing with us so much. Thank you for this authentic, joyful conversation. I've learned so much and been encouraged and empowered, and I really hope that everyone that's been watching feels the same way too. Can we give everybody a big round of applause, please? I want to say there are many more questions in my lap that I didn't get to, but I hope that this afternoon's workshops are an opportunity. Like, that is all about talking, having those conversations, asking those questions that you still have. We've got fantastic speakers and facilitators in all of those sessions. So I really, really hope that you can keep the conversations going and get things answered. Okay, Joyce, can I hand back over to you?
You can, and I think the best advice I ever had was be yourself. So I'm going to thank all the contributors, but before I do that, I do thank you all, but I also want to introduce Natasha Asker's video. She can't be here today, but she is clearly the first woman of colour who has been elected here. But I think I also have to say that I had a colleague in the second election who would have been the first woman of colour had she not died of breast cancer, sadly, Mary Rees. So I always try to just remember Mary Rees, but Natasha did thankfully make it, and she's going to share some thoughts with us now.
Hi everyone, my name is Natasha Asker. I'm the Conservative Regional Member of the Welsh Parliament for South East Wales. I am so sorry that I couldn't attend the event today, but I wish you all the very, very best of success. I want to share a few little things with you because I know I can't be there, but these are my 3 top tips for those of you women who are passionate about politics. 1, never let the rejection get you down. I stood for 6 elections before I actually won my seat for South East Wales, and believe you me, I have absolutely no regrets. The second point I'd like for all of you ladies to never forget is that keep persevering at your passions. If you're passionate about something, there's absolutely nothing that you can't achieve. And if you don't want to have a career in politics, being in the front line, that's absolutely fine. There are thousands of jobs within the civil service that allow you to make a difference, not only in your day-to-day life, but within the community at large. And last but not least, I know many of you are passionate about breaking those all-important glass ceilings. So never let anyone tell you that there's something that you can't do in life, because if you put your heart, mind, and soul into it, nothing is impossible.
And she certainly does put her heart and soul into it, I have to say. Anyway, it's been a great morning. I hope that people, have been a little bit inspired. But I've got the lovely job now of inviting you to go to the Neuadd for lunch. I think that's always the best gig. And there's going to be a performance from the Oasis Choir. And Crystal and Beth Williams' lunch will last until 1:25, and at that point you ought to know which workshop you've decided you want to do, so you can carry on forward to that. But lunch and performance sounds like a good idea to me. First of all, they come and they said to me, she's not here, but we let you know if she comes. So I'm filling a gap.